Ever feel like sometimes with all this tech, we miss the little things?
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving deep into a research paper that's all about the tiny details.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of tiny details?
Insects.
Insects, interesting. I always love learning more about those little creatures.
We're talking about how scientists are using cutting-edge technology to observe insect behavior in a completely new way.
Okay, now you've got my attention. That sounds fascinating.
It's pretty amazing stuff. We're talking high-resolution videos of insects in flight, capturing every tiny detail, from the twitch of their antenna to the delicate veins in their wings.
Wow, you're telling me. I can't even imagine trying to film something that small and fast with that much detail. How do they even begin to do that?
That's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Great, let's dive in.
The paper we're looking at is called High-Resolution Outdoor Videography of Insects Using Fast Lock-On Tracking. And it claims to solve a problem that's been a real thorn in the side of insect researchers for ages.
Okay, and what's that?
It's this constant trade-off between getting a wide view of an insect's movements and capturing really fine details.
Oh, I see. So it's like choosing between a blurry map that shows you the whole forest or a super zoomed in snapshot of a single leaf. You can't see the forest for the trees. Or the insect for the wing, I guess you could say.
Exactly. And with traditional methods, you're often forced to choose. You can use radar tracking, which gives you a good sense of an insect's overall flight path, but the details are fuzzy.
Right, like trying to study ant behavior from space. You know they're moving, but good luck figuring out what they're actually up to.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of using stationary cameras in a lab setting. You might get those incredible close-ups, but you're missing out on how these insects behave in their natural environment, where things get really interesting.
Totally. You can't replicate the complexity of the real world in a lab. Insects are interacting with wind, with other insects, with plants, all sorts of variables.
Absolutely. So this research team, they decided to tackle this problem head-on, and their solution, it's incredibly clever.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they come up with?
They call it fast lock-on tracking, or FLO for short.
FLO. I like it. Has a nice ring to it. So how does it work?
Are we talking about attaching tiny little GoPros to these insects?
Not quite GoPros, but you're on the right track with the whole attaching thing.
Oh.
Yeah, they attach a teeny tiny retroreflective marker to the insect.
A marker, huh? What does that do?
It basically acts like a miniature mirror, reflecting infrared light back to a camera.
So it's like giving the insect a little beacon for the camera to follow.
Precisely. It gives the camera a constant target, allowing it to adjust its aim in real time to keep the insect perfectly in focus, even when it's darting and weaving through the air. Imagine like a personal cameraman for a bug.
A dedicated camera crew for every critter. Now that's impressive. But I have to ask, this kind of technology has been used to track bacteria under a microscope, right? What makes this different?
You're right, the concept isn't brand new, but applying it to insects in a much larger and less predictable environment, that's a whole other ballgame.
So scaling this up, it's not just a matter of getting a bigger camera and a brighter light, is it?
Not at all. They had to develop some seriously innovative solutions to make it work.
All right, so walk me through it. This FLO system, what are we talking about here? Some high-speed camera on a super-powered tripod.
Well, it's not quite a simple tripod, but I appreciate the imagery. Essentially, at its core, you've got a low-latency camera, meaning it reacts really quickly mounted on what we call pan-tilt motors, so it can move smoothly and precisely in any direction.
Okay, I'm picturing it. A camera that can swivel and turn on a dime. But we're talking about incredibly fast insects here. Even with a fast camera, isn't it still going to be playing catch-up?
You're absolutely right. Just a fast camera isn't enough. They had to get a lot more creative to keep up with those high-speed maneuvers.
No, what's the secret sauce? What did they do?
Well, this is where the magic of programming comes in. They use something called a Kalman filter.
A Kalman filter sounds complicated.
It is pretty complex, but basically think of it like this. It gives the camera a sixth sense, allowing it to predict where the insect is going to be next based on its previous movements.
Whoa, a camera that can predict the future. That's wild.
It's not magic, just really clever programming. It analyzes the insect's speed, direction, and acceleration to anticipate its trajectory.
So it's not just reacting, it's actively predicting the insect's every move. That's amazing.
Exactly. And this makes the tracking incredibly smooth, preventing the camera from losing track, even if the insect makes a sudden dive or a quick turn. Remember that blurry map analogy? Well, this is like giving the map real-time updates, so you can zoom in on any part of the forest and still see exactly where that insect is headed, down to the centimeter.
That's incredible. It sounds like this common filter is a game changer for tracking anything that moves quickly and erratically, not just insects.
Absolutely. This technology has applications in all sorts of fields. But in the world of insect research, it's nothing short of revolutionary. And it gets even cooler because to get that really precise tracking, they actually use stereo cameras.
Stereo cameras, like those old school 3D movie cameras, are we going to need special glasses to watch these insect documentaries?
Huh, not quite. Think of it this way. Just like our eyes, right? We've got two, and they work together, and that's how we can judge distance.
Yeah, depth perception, right?
Exactly. And so these stereo cameras, they do the same thing for the FLO system. They help it judge distance so it can maintain that super precise focus even when the insect is like all over the place, flitting around in three-dimensional space.
Ah, so it's like creating this super accurate 3D model of the insect's flight path in real time.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. But let's talk about the actual footage for a second, because, getting those crystal clear shots of a bug in motion, especially outside, that can't be easy.
It's incredibly challenging. You're dealing with wind, changing light conditions.
And sunlight, the bane of every photographer's existence. How do they deal with that? Sunlight must just wash everything out.
You're right. Sunlight's a huge challenge. It can totally drown out the signal from that tiny retroreflective marker we talked about.
Right, because it's reflecting light back from everywhere.
Exactly. So to combat that, they use something called pulsed infrared light.
Pulsed infrared light. Sounds intense. What is that? Are we talking like heat-seeking missile levels of intensity here?
Not quite, haha.
Uh-huh.
Think of it more like a really, really targeted strobe light. The system emits these super quick bursts of infrared light, and the camera's equipped with special filters so it only captures images during those bursts.
Ah, I see. So it's like cutting through the noise by only seeing what's being lit up by that infrared strobe.
Exactly. That's a great way to think about it. It helps to isolate the marker from all that visual clutter that you get with sunlight.
That is seriously clever. But what about blur? Insects move so fast. Even with a super fast camera and this whole infrared strobe system, wouldn't you still end up with like a blurry mess?
Yeah, that's another major hurdle. And this is where things get really, really innovative. Remember we were talking about the stereo cameras?
Yeah.
Well, they're only part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
They've also got this large periscope-like mirror that's integrated into the whole setup.
Hold on a second. A periscope, like on a submarine.
You got it. But instead of looking for other ships, this periscope, it's all about magnification. So it reflects the light path up to this very powerful lens, a lens with a long focal length.
Okay, and that helps how?
So lenses with long focal lengths, they're what you use for like extreme close-ups in photography and filmmaking. And that's because they can magnify things that are really far away.
So they don't have to be right on top of the insect to get that super close-up view.
Right. Which is key when you're dealing with, a bee that's buzzing around.
That makes sense. So we're not just talking about seeing the insect like as a moving speck, right? We're talking about seeing individual legs, antenna, all of that in sharp focus.
You got it. They're capturing the individual segments of their legs, the veins in their wings, even the tiny hairs that cover their bodies.
No way, even when they're in flight.
Yep. And it's not just theoretical. Like, they've successfully filmed a locust, a honeybee, a bumblebee, all with this system.
That's incredible. It's like having a bug's eye view of the world. I'm honestly blown away by this. But I have to ask, you mentioned that they tested this on a toy quadcopter.
Yeah, they did. It might sound kind of strange, but it was actually really smart.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. If you start with something predictable, something you can control, like a quadcopter,
Right.
it lets you really put the system through its paces in a controlled way. So they can fine-tune all those algorithms, make sure it can handle those quick turns and dives.
So before they let it loose on like an actual bee, that's going to be a lot less predictable.
Exactly. They can really push it to the limit and work out any kinks in a controlled environment. It's like a test run for the system.
Makes total sense. So they use the quadcopter to like refine the system, make sure everything's working perfectly.
Exactly.
Okay, so they've proven it works in the lab, but what about the real world? Like, can we expect swarms of these camera-equipped insects just buzzing around, broadcasting their every move?
Not quite swarms yet.
Uh-huh.
But They are making progress toward more natural settings. They've even tested a smaller version of FLO mounted on a drone.
Whoa, a drone. So now we've got a flying camera crew for our insect stars. Next level.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And they were able to track a bee in open air, which is a huge deal.
That's incredible. Imagine the possibilities, right? Studying these insects in their natural habitats, no lab setting, seeing how they interact with the environment with each other, we could learn so much.
The possibilities are pretty much endless.
I can only imagine. But I'm guessing the drone setup comes with its own set of challenges, right? It
Yeah.
can't be as simple as just like strapping the camera to a drone and hitting record.
Yeah, you're right about that. One of the biggest hurdles, actually, is reflection. Yeah, so remember how we talked about the pulsed infrared light, how it cuts through all the visual noise?
Yeah.
Well, turns out those pulses, they can bounce off of things in the environment, like trees, buildings, whatever's around.
And that messes with the tracking.
Big time.
Hmm.
So it becomes a lot more complicated to isolate that signal from the marker.
Oh, I get it. So it's like trying to track a firefly in like a hall of mirrors. You're getting all these false signals.
Yes, exactly. So they're still working on refining that drone setup, figuring out how to deal with those challenges.
It makes sense. It's like this whole new frontier they're trying to conquer. It's like we're entering this whole new era of insect observation. But it makes me think, even with this stationary setup, this whole thing feels kind of ethically complex, right? We're talking about attaching devices to living creatures.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really important consideration. And I'll say the researchers, they seem very aware of that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, like, for one thing, they mostly used commercially raised bees for their experiments.
So they're not just like scooping up bees from the wild and attaching these things to them.
Right, exactly. And using those commercially raised insects, it gives them a lot more control over the variables, right?
Makes sense. So it makes the research more accurate, but it also like minimizes the impact on those wild populations.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. But even with commercially raised insects, I still can't help but wonder, like, even that tiny marker, does it mess with their behavior at all?
It's a valid concern, for sure, and the researchers, they acknowledge that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they're like, look, we've tried to make these markers as small and unobtrusive as possible, but there's always a chance they could have some effect. And so to address that, they're constantly watching the insects.
Okay, like monitoring their
Yeah,
behavior.
exactly. Looking for any signs of stress,
Mhm.
or if they're moving differently than they normally would.
It's good to hear. It's a delicate balance, right?
Yeah.
Like, we want to push the boundaries of what we can learn, but not at the expense of the insect's well-being.
100%. And it sounds like they're taking that responsibility seriously.
Good, good. That makes me feel better. But let's zoom out for a second. We've talked a lot about the how, this crazy new way of observing insects. But let's talk about the why. Why is this a big deal? Why go through all this trouble to track a bee in 3D?
Right. So it's cool, but what can we actually do with this?
Exactly.
Well, the exciting thing is that this goes way beyond just filming insects, making cool nature documentaries.
Right. This is about actual scientific discovery.
Exactly. With this level of precision, we can start to answer questions that before were basically impossible.
Okay, like give me an example.
Well, let's take flight mechanics, for example.
Mm.
Think about how a bee, how it adjusts its wings to, like, navigate a gust of wind or to land on a flower that's swaying back and forth.
Yeah, it's incredible.
With this technology, we can see those tiny adjustments in action in incredible detail. We can see how they do that.
So we could actually see the mechanics of flight, like in real time, no more just like simulations or theoretical models.
Exactly. And that kind of knowledge, it could be applied to everything from designing better drones to, like, fundamentally understanding the aerodynamics of insect flight.
That's wild. What else? What other mysteries can we unlock with this?
Well, think about learning and memory. How do bees map their surroundings? How do they find their way back to the hive after visiting, hundreds of flowers?
Yeah, it's like they have this built-in GPS.
Right. And with this technology, we can actually track their flight paths with incredible accuracy and maybe finally start to understand how they do it.
Wow. It's like we're getting a glimpse into their minds, understanding how they see the world, how they navigate.
Yeah, it's revolutionary. And that's just scratching the surface.
Right.
There's so many other questions we can start to answer, like what about the impact of pesticides on insect behavior?
Oh, right. We could see how they react like in real time to different chemicals, different environments.
Exactly. Or how about the effects of habitat loss? By comparing how insects move in a healthy versus damaged environment, we can start to see, like, the direct impact these threats have on their behavior.
And that could help us figure out how to protect them better.
Exactly.
This is amazing. It really feels like we're on the verge of this whole new understanding of insects.
We are. And the crazy thing is, we're just getting started.
What do you mean? Is there even more to come?
The researchers are already talking about, like, the next frontier,
Is
getting rid of the marker.
no marker, but then how do you even track the insect?
That's the million-dollar question. But some really smart people are working on it, trying to develop systems that can use things like, I don't know, an insect's shape, its color patterns, even just the way it moves to track it.
Wait, so the camera would just like recognize it's an insect and follow it?
That's the idea.
Mm.
It sounds like science fiction, but
Yeah.
with AI and computer vision getting better all the time, it's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
That's incredible. It's like this whole field is evolving so quickly.
It really is. And the best part is, the researchers who are doing this work, they're super open about it. They've made their designs and their code available for anyone to use.
Wow, so other researchers can just like take their work and run with it.
Exactly. It's this open source approach to science, which is really exciting. It means that the technology can evolve faster, more people can get involved.
That's fantastic. And it just goes to show, sometimes the smallest things, like a tiny insect, they can lead to the biggest discoveries.
Couldn't agree more. And who knows, maybe someday soon, thanks to all this amazing research, we'll be able to see the world through an insect's eyes.
Now that is a thought. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. But wow, what a journey, right?
For sure. It's mind-blowing to think about all the incredible things we're learning about these tiny creatures, thanks to some seriously impressive technology.
It just goes to show there's always more to discover, even in the most unexpected places. And for our listeners, keep your eyes peeled and your ears open because you never know what amazing discoveries are buzzing right around the corner.